Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain and Logistics, the Storytellers. The series is brought to you by CAP Logistics. CAP Logistics are experts offering you customized transportation solutions for every need. So please visit caplogistics.com today. All right, so today's topic I'm really excited about. We're going to discuss Brexit, what that means. And I'm really excited to have Erin Kuhn here. She's the British Consul for Colorado. So, Erin, thank you much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get into our topic, let's learn a little bit about you. So tell us about kind of how you got involved and a little bit about yourself.
Sure, of course. So you'll probably notice that I don't have that lovely British accent, and I can't even fake it. So I'm a former American diplomat now working for the British government. I started my career with the U.S. Department of State. I worked in D.C. at what we call Main State, or kind of headquarters there, for several years. And then I worked up at the U.S. mission to the UN. My area of expertise while I was at the State Department was multilateral diplomacy, so advancing U.S. foreign policy objectives through the UN and its affiliated agencies. And my specific area of focus was kind of Middle East affairs, so the fun stuff, Israel, Palestine, Iraq, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I left the State Department and I joined a consulting firm and started consulting for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and did a lot of work there around promoting global health, promoting life-saving child vaccines around the world. And my main focus was around eradicating polio, so work that I really felt good about doing. And then I joined New York University, NYU, and helped NYU expand its global footprint and expand its campuses around the world. And then left New York City and moved with my family here to Colorado, and haven't looked back since, because I love living in the state.
Yes, it's wonderful. You and I were talking a little bit about skiing and the beauties of the state before there, so I would agree 100%.
Oh, yeah, it's a great place to live.
Good. Well, let's start. You always want to start from the beginning.
Sure.
So why don't you give our audience just a quick overview of what Brexit means, and start from there.
Sure, of course. So Brexit, as it's commonly referred to, is the UK's exit or departure from the European Union. This was a decision that was made back in June 2016 through what we call a national referendum, so a democratic process that asked the British people to vote on whether or not they wanted to leave the European Union or have the UK remain a part of the European Union. And by a margin of about 52% to 48%, the British people decided that they wanted to leave the EU.
Okay.
So then in March 2017, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, triggered something called Article 50, which is sort of legalese, but really what it is it is the process that a country has to go through to leave the European Union. And once Article 50 is triggered, a country then has a 2-year time period, by the end of which it has to have determined what its relationship with the EU is going to look like. So that 2-year time period ends at the end of March 2019, March 29th specifically. So it's coming up pretty quick here.
Yeah, I know that there was a lot of obviously, back in the summer of 17, there was a lot of discussion, and then it's come up again because things are happening in March.
Yep.
So the question of do we stay or do we go, like, what was the catalyst behind that, first and foremost? I mean, we know that was the decision, but where did it come from? Why was it even brought up?
Yeah, I think, there was a lot of talk by folks in the UK, by the British public, just, questions about, maintaining control of borders, bringing laws back into the UK, having just a little bit more independence, being able to forge the UK's own trade policy. And so those are some of the factors that caused the referendum to come about, and also were some of the factors that I think people voted on when they kind of cast their vote for whether they would leave or remain in the European Union. So those are, I think, some of the factors. But of course, with any democracy, people vote for all different kinds of reasons, just like in the U.S. So it's hard to kind of pigeonhole and say these are exactly the reasons why the referendum happened, and these are the reasons why the referendum went in the direction that it did. But I think those are some of the common themes that we've seen emerge.
Gotcha. Is there any precedent for a country leaving the EU? Has this ever happened before?
So Greenland did leave the European Union, and it was several years ago. But I think, Greenland's economy and the British economy they're slightly different, and I think there's some more complexities with the UK's departure from the EU. I mean, the UK is the 5th largest economy in the world. And so, from an economic perspective, there's a little bit more to kind of think through at this point. So it has been done before, but in a sense, we are still forging our own and new trail.
Yeah. For sure. So, so there's the 2-year Article 50. So there was 2 years. It was March of 17. We're coming on March of 19. Mm-hmm. So give us a perspective, like what's the current position and where are we right now?
Sure.
Related to the deal.
Yeah, so after Article 50 was triggered in March 2017, there were a series of negotiations that the UK and the EU went through. And now we're at a point where the UK and the Prime Minister have agreed upon kind of 2 things with the European Union, with the 27 other member states. The first is kind of what we call a withdrawal agreement. So that's kind of the terms of the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. So that includes everything from, citizens' rights, so the rights of EU citizens living in the UK, the rights of Brits living in EU countries. It includes, the financial settlement, which you may have heard referred to in the media as like the divorce bill. It also includes sort of an implementation period. So even though Article 50 kind of the negotiations end at the end of March 2019, there will be an implementation period until the end of December 2020 to allow for all of the details of the negotiation and all of the details of the new partnership to kind of be hammered out and to give businesses and others kind of some certainty. So they've agreed to kind of the withdrawal agreement, and then they've also agreed to the terms of kind of a political declaration that sets out what the new economic and security relationship will look like with, between the UK and the EU. So these things have been agreed again between kind of the UK and the European Union. Now, both the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration are going to be put in front of British Parliament to vote on, and that vote is set to take place at some point in the week of January 14th, so right around the corner.
Yeah, lots of things are happening in the next couple of
absolutely
next couple of months. So, is it could it potentially just not happen, or could it be delayed? So, what would potentially cause it to have some sort of issue?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I would say right now the British government and the Prime Minister are focused on passing this deal. And, the Prime Minister has been very clear that this is a deal that delivers on the wishes of the British public, as set forth through the national referendum. It's a deal that, takes control back of the borders, of laws. It allows for the economy to grow and prosper, for jobs to grow and prosper. And she said, this is the best deal that we're going to get. So she's focused on pushing it through. So I think that's where all the effort and all the energy is at this point. Now, it's possible that it might not get pushed through. And so what the Prime Minister has said is that, if Parliament does not vote this through, that in a sense the UK could start back at square one, and that could provoke more kind of uncertainty for businesses. It could promote more divisiveness in the country, which is never a good thing, and it also takes kind of the British government away from focusing on important domestic issues as well, because all the time is focused on Brexit negotiations. So I would say all the energy right now is on pushing the deal forward, but it is certainly possible that it might not get voted through.
Yeah, well, I can appreciate that. It's been a lot of prep work, and if it just doesn't happen, the uncertainty in and of itself is going to create more problems.
Yeah.
So one term that I've heard in the past is a soft exit and a hard exit. I know those are kind of terms that may be thrown around by media and things of that nature, but expand a little bit about what those terms do or do not mean when you say hard and soft exit.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, those terms are being thrown around a lot by the media and by different personalities. And I would say, what the Prime Minister is focused on is not looking at Brexit as hard or soft, but looking at kind of developing a Brexit deal that's best for the British people. And that's what she said the deal that we have right now is. It delivers on the will of the people. It helps build the economy. It helps protect borders. It helps protect laws. It does all of those things. And so instead of looking at it as either hard or soft, we're looking at it as this is the deal that's on the table and it's a good deal.
Right. One thing that I've heard in the last couple of months is the relationship with Ireland. Mm-hmm. There's 300 miles of a border there. Talk about that relationship and interaction related to Ireland.
Yeah, it's a great question because there's a lot of focus on sort of the Irish border right now. So as you said, the Republic of Ireland is its own independent sovereign country. It shares a border with Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. And the Prime Minister has been clear from the very beginning that, any sort of Brexit cannot go back to a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland because the peace process has worked so hard to move away from hard borders. She's also said that we can't have a border down the Irish Sea. So that would be like a Northern Ireland specific solution because that kind of complicates the integrity of the United Kingdom. So right now, in terms of negotiations, they're working on an innovative solution that sort of doesn't require a hard border, but also doesn't require a border down the Irish Sea. So that's sort of where we are at this point. You've probably, heard of the term the backstop. It's something that's being thrown around in the media a lot right now and thrown around in negotiations. And really, what the backstop is, if by the end of the implementation period, so the end of 2020, if all of the details of the future relationship aren't nailed down or sort of, hammered out, it's a question of what happens at that border. And so the backstop, is being talked about as kind of a temporary EU-UK customs union to, again, sort of avoid a hard border. There's also been talk about sort of an extension of the implementation period as well, again, to kind of avoid that hard border. But those are all temporary solutions. And I just want to underscore that because, they are only things that would come into play if the negotiations don't conclude by the end of 2020. And, both parties, the UK and the EU, are very committed and are negotiating in good faith to have everything concluded by the end of 2020. So these are all only if scenarios. They're not when scenarios.
Gotcha. So if we hear the term backstop more and more, that may not necessarily be a good thing. Because initially I was thinking, okay, well, that could potentially be a backstop and helpful. But like you indicated, the will of the people is we want this to happen, and the more delays is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, and it's just one of the things that has to be part of the negotiation because, again, one of the key policy priorities for the British government has been not to go back to a hard border. So these are all kind of solutions that we're looking at, again, if the future partnership is not worked out by 2020. But I should just, again, underscore that everybody is working in good faith to have everything done by 2020.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously we both live in Colorado. We love the state.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about Brexit itself, but let's talk about how that impacts Colorado and what that would mean for the average Coloradan that's out here. It's great to learn about it, but what does it really mean to me, either as a citizen or a business owner?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a topic.
Kind of open-ended, right?
Yeah, I love talking about this because the truth is there's such a strong relationship between Colorado and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, maybe we start there and let's put Brexit on the side for a second and talk about the relationship.
No, I'd be happy to. It's one of my favorite topics. So, Winston Churchill back in 1946 coined the phrase special relationship to talk about sort of U.S.-UK ties. And I think the truth is you can look no further than Colorado to really see that special relationship at play. And I'll give you some kind of examples of why. The first is there's an incredibly strong economic and business relationship between the state of Colorado and the United Kingdom. You may not know this, but the UK is by far and away the largest foreign direct investor in the state.
Really?
By far and away. There are over 200 British subsidiaries here, and that number just continues to grow. They employ over 16,000 Coloradans. So that's kind of on the investment side. On the trade side, the UK is a top 5 trading partner for Colorado goods and services. Those exports fuel another kind of nearly 11,000 jobs in the state, and those exports are valued at about $1.5 billion annually. So it's a pretty significant economic relationship. The city of Denver and the city of London just entered into a city-to-city formal partnership because we're seeing so much sort of business ties growing between those two cities. So on the economic side, it's just an incredibly strong relationship that's not just strong but continues to grow at a pretty rapid clip.
Right.
But that's not all. The relationship with Colorado is built on a foundation of, defense ties. So Colorado is, a state with a lot of major military installations. We have British officers, particularly Royal Air Force officers, stationed at almost all of Colorado's major military installations.
Really?
They're working side by side with U.S. military officers to, frankly, keep the world safe. So incredibly strong defense ties. We have strong policy and knowledge sharing ties as well. We do a lot in areas like energy, specifically around clean growth and renewable energy. We do a lot around cybersecurity, around smart cities technologies. We do a lot around space. So we're tied on sort of that policy side as well. And then, finally, we have incredible travel and tourism ties as well. Sure. So there are now 3 nonstop flights between Colorado and London, both to London Heathrow and to London Gatwick airports. Yeah. BA, British Airways, just celebrated its 20th anniversary, which is fantastic.
We had mentioned that. That's surprising. I guess it defines how old we are, because I certainly remember when that celebration happened.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, they are Denver International Airport's largest long-haul flight. So there's a really strong foundation for kind of the Colorado-UK special relationship.
Gotcha. You had mentioned that Denver and London just started that special relationship. So what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's kind of a formal partnership between the City of London and the City of Denver, and it's to help grow kind of their economic ties and their economic relationship. And so what it does is it allows for basically soft landing packages for Denver companies that want to set up in the UK. They can get things like discounted office space, some transportation benefits, access to networks. And the reciprocal is true for London-based companies that are setting up in Denver as well. So it basically, again, kind of establishes soft landing packages and just allows for more kind of business exchange between those two cities. And it's, from my perspective, it's just great to see that kind of partnership formalized.
Yeah. I like that terminology. So there's so many positive things between the two countries. Talk about, is Brexit going to really impact that? I mean, just listening to what you're saying, it doesn't seem like, other than knowing knowledge about Brexit, the relationship isn't going to change a whole lot. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I mean, we are starting from a position of strength in terms of the relationship between Colorado and the UK. It is so strong to begin with that I don't, foresee Brexit having any major negative impacts. There are some opportunities, in fact. So one of the things that the UK will be able to do after it leaves the European Union is start to forge its own independent trade policy around the world. And that means, developing bilateral free trade agreements. And, a free trade agreement with the US is sort of top of list.
Sure.
And so there are more, I think, even more opportunities to further build and strengthen that Colorado economic relationship as we start to dive into some free trade agreement work.
Right. Yeah, you always hear it's just the natural inclination of humans and media is like all the negative, like, oh my gosh. And you've talked about, some of the positive. So the free trade agreements that will be able to be forged obviously is a positive. What other type of positive impacts do you think Brexit would have for the state of Colorado?
I think we're still figuring that out in a sense, because the negotiations are still happening, and you don't want to sort of prejudge what the future relationship is going to look like until it's fully agreed upon. So it's sort of hard at this point to kind of point to exactly what the impacts will be. But again, I think the opportunities for the free trade agreement are certainly one, and I think other opportunities will kind of fall into place as we see the negotiations proceed and get finalized as well.
Yeah. That's good. It'll be an interesting time.
Yeah.
So the free trade agreements, so now Brexit is separate, and we're looking to do free trade agreements. Is that something that happens quickly? Within 6 months, we're going to have all these great opportunities to engage Britain in a different way? Or is it more something that's going to be years out?
I think it's hard to predict because that work is just starting to happen. We're kind of in the most initial phases. There's kind of a US-UK working group looking at this, and both the US and the UK have started to do its own kind of listening tours throughout the US and throughout the UK to kind of better understand what are businesses and other stakeholders seeing as barriers, what would they like lifted, what would they like to see out of a free trade agreement. So I would say we're in the very, very initial stages of it. It's hard to predict what that timeline will look like. But what I would say, again, from a Colorado perspective is, we're interested in hearing from businesses and stakeholders who want to have input into that free trade agreement, into that potential free trade agreement. If they see barriers, if they see other aspects that they would want to be part of that agreement, do get in touch with us and let us know, because we are actively seeking that kind of feedback.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So on Brexit, this may be more either specific to Colorado or more national. Do you see any unintended consequences that could come out of this? And this may just be your personal perspective. I'm not sure how much you can elaborate on that, but that's a term that I've heard as well.
Yeah, I don't at the moment. And again, it's a bit sort of premature to say because the negotiations haven't concluded and, nothing's finalized until everything's finalized in a sense. But what I will say is that, the British government is working towards developing a new relationship with the EU that's beneficial for everybody, beneficial for the UK, for the EU, and for international investors in the UK. So we're working towards an agreement that works for everyone. And so right now, I don't see any unintended consequences, but I do see, like I said, the opportunity that we see with the new potential free trade agreement with the US.
Right. As far as the EU goes, and I know some of this is your personal opinion, but yeah. I'll ask it anyway. Do you think that the relationship with the EU and the United States will change at all now that Britain is no longer part of it?
I'm not sure. It's hard. It's hard for me to answer that question in this role and in this capacity. I represent the British government, so I wouldn't want to speak on kind of behalf of the U.S. or the EU. So I think you'd have to ask those folks to get to get an answer. So I probably have to dodge that one a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. You didn't know I was going to throw that one out at you. Thanks a lot, Doug. I appreciate it. That's great. So what advice would you have for, and maybe advice isn't quite the right word, but if I was just an average Coloradan guy out there or gal that was learning more about Brexit, what kind of some thoughts would you give to the citizens of Colorado? Yeah,
that's a great question. I mean, what I would say is, get in touch with us. If you are a business or if you are a different kind of stakeholder who has questions about Brexit, wants to talk about Brexit, wants to understand how Brexit can directly impact their particular sector, their particular business, I would say get in touch with us. Let's just start a conversation and have that dialogue. That's what we're doing around the entirety of the United States, is having these conversations and better understanding what the concerns are and how we can address those concerns. So I would say get in touch with us. The same goes for, this potential free trade agreement. If you are a business or another stakeholder who wants to give us feedback on that, who wants to help us identify a barrier that we may not otherwise have been aware of, let us know. We really want to do outreach. We really want to be externally focused in this. And, our door is always open to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm. So how would I go about doing that? Tell us about how to get in touch with you and your organization.
Yeah, so throughout the U.S., we have the embassy in D.C., we have consulates at cities, major cities in the U.S., and in Colorado, we have something called the U.K. Government Office, which is what I lead. So I would say just look us up, get in touch with us, reach out via email or telephone, and we are really open to having conversations with you. I mean, that's our job. That's why we're here. We're here to kind of build and foster, ties. So just let us know, and we'll be happy to chat.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
So, do you have any? So let's on our last few minutes here reset the timelines that we're talking about, because we talked about Article 50 and this time happens there. So just in a quick snippet, maybe what happens in the next 1 year?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So March 29th, 2017, that's when, 2019, March 29th, 2019 is when, the Article 50 negotiations kind of end. That's when sort of the terms of the new relationship, the terms of the withdrawal have to be agreed upon. So that's one date to keep an eye out for. Even sooner than that, Parliament is set to vote on the deal the week of January 14th. So those are two dates to kind of keep an eye out for. And then the end of December 2020 is when, the implementation period is set to end. Again, that's all based on whether or not the full package deal, the withdrawal agreement, and the political declaration get passed through. So those are just a couple of dates to keep an eye out for.
Gotcha.
And of course, things can pop up in between as well.
Yes, I know. It can happen quickly. So we talked about the 29th of March and then December 20th of 2020.
Yeah.
Like, give me one or two things that would happen in that 18-month period.
So really what's going to be happening then is all of the final details of the future relationship will be hashed out. So, by the end of March, I think a sort of a political declaration will hopefully be in place, but that will just be broad strokes of what the future relationship will look like. That period from the end of March to the end of December 2020 is when all of the details kind of get worked out.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of detailed work.
That's the fun part.
Yeah, the fun part, if you will.
And I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting things that'll happen. So that's terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I personally learned a lot about Brexit and kind of what it means, and learning more about the relationship with Colorado and Britain. So thank you. I really appreciate your time today.
No, thank you for the opportunity. It was great to chat about this.
Great. And thank you for joining us today on the Connect and Collaborate Network, featuring supply chain logistics, the Storytellers. We've had a phenomenal storyteller today. And don't forget, this was brought to you by Cap Logistics. Thanks again.
Thank you.